everybody. Welcome. We're just going to give it a couple minutes to let everybody come in. I see the number slowly ticking up on the participants, so I'm sure there's a bunch in the waiting room right now. Awesome. Welcome in, everybody. We're just going to give it a couple more minutes to allow some more folks to trickle in. We'll get started at 2:05. right, guys, I have the time at 2:05, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jessie Wales. I am one of 3 community engagement coordinators with the IRLNEP. Today, we're going to be discussing our upcoming requests for proposals for the 4 main categories. If you are interested in learning more about the small grants program that we will be offering in February, just a heads up, we will be having a separate webinar for grant writing for the small grants in early February. So some of the questions you may have today may not pertain to our larger grant cycles, but don't worry, we are going to have a webinar in place for the smaller ones as well. You will notice that we have gone ahead and disabled cameras, microphones, and the chat box. We ask that you use the question and answer box to ask any questions that you may have as we go along through the presentations. So feel free to ask your questions. We'll make sure to get to it at the end of Daniel's presentation. And if for some reason we go over time and we don't answer your question, just know that we will follow up with you guys via email and make sure that everything is answered today. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Today we have Daniel Kolodny, who is the Chief Operating Officer of the IRLNEP, and he is going to be going over all of our grant opportunities we have coming up with a deadline of January 5th. So mark that down on your calendars. All grants are due January 5th. All right, Daniel, take it away.
All right, thanks, Jessie. So welcome to the webinar about the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program's request for proposal process. And the goal of this webinar is to help applicants develop and put together a proposal for one of our RFPs or our request for proposal calls. And we typically release 4 recurring RFPs every year. These include water quality restoration, habitat restoration, community-based restoration, and science and innovation. We also issue a small grants RFP like Jessie said, but that process is going to be explored in a future webinar. So I'm going to kind of just go over a quick outline of the topics I plan to cover today so that any applicant can be successful in preparing, submitting, and hopefully being awarded. First, we are going to go over the process of identifying a project you have and then determining which category your project applies to by looking at each category's criteria to be eligible. Next, once you have a project and a category determined, looking at that conditions for funding is key. We'll then go over each section of the proposal so you know what information should be included in those sections. We'll then review timelines to submission, award decision notification, contracting, and eventual project start. And lastly, we'll go over frequently asked questions and take any of your questions from you all. So the first thing you want to do is develop a project. Do you have one that is shovel ready? Great. Maybe it's just a concept and design and engineering needs to be completed. Also great. Those are all types of projects that may apply here. And the first thing you should do is look at our Comprehensive Conservation and Management Plan, or CCMP. This is the heart of the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program's mission to a healthy lagoon and guides all projects that are eligible under these RFPs. Even if your project touches one of the 32 vital signs listed in this wheel, it is possible the project may not meet the specific proposal criteria. So let's take a look at those criteria. First, let's take a step back. Where can you find these RFP documents? The easiest place to find them is at onelagoon.org. This is also going to be where you can find questions asked about the RFPs and their corresponding answers. Notice of decisions will also be posted here. So let's go ahead and take a look. So once this main homepage loads, what you want to do is take your cursor and hover it over the One Community tab at the top. Scroll down to Funding and Grants, then over to Open Proposal Requests and click. And what you're going to see here is all the current categories that are open that I just mentioned, as well as the questions listed and their answers below. So we already have quite a few questions for this cycle. So let's see what these look like. So every RFP announcement is going to be set up in this same format for the first page. You're going to have all the different sections and some additional attachments that will aid you in your proposal. The first part's going to list when you have to be due, and we're going to say this many times, January 5th, 2024 by 5 p.m. It's going to give you a little bit of background on each one, so how much is available, how much you can, the minimum and maximum you can apply to, as well as the criteria, and we're going to go over that in just a minute here. As you scroll further down, you can see your conditions for funding, requirements for match, some more submission requirements, additional legal information, proposal review and award information, and then the actual application sections itself. We scroll far enough down, you can actually see copies of the watershed and the scoring rubric. And then, of course, some sample contract agreements and the scopes of work. So let's get back and look at the actual criteria for each section, and we'll start with water quality. So as you saw when I was going through it, your minimum that you can ask for is $15,000 up to $350,000. The match requirement is 50-50, so that means at least 50% of the total project cost or match. So if you're asking for $350,000, you have to come up with at least $350,000 to be eligible. Your project must also align with the CCMP. And this first criteria here mentions 3 critical health concern vital signs. And you'll see this reflected in the bonus points in the score. The second criteria for water quality is that it must remove nutrients and or other contaminants. And lastly, you must quantify those reductions. That means pounds of nitrogen, pounds of phosphorus, and if applicable, pounds of total suspended solids in gallons of fresh water. Now, if you're thinking of a project but say it's not shovel ready, remember we said that's okay. Design and engineering is allowable, but in addition to the 3 criteria I just mentioned, there are some additional criteria. You must complete 100% plans and secure permits by the end of the 12-month award period. If the project's shovel ready, then the project must also be completed in that 12-month award period. There are some additional eligible types of projects, such as innovative pilot projects, and there's some criteria as well for that. There must be some initial testing to show that completion of that project will deliver one or more of the following: enhanced effectiveness and efficiency that would transform lagoon wide restoration practices, a significant reduction of costs without sacrificing performance, and or beneficial uses of waste streams that improve long-term sustainability. There are some additional other applicable projects that are eligible, such as large, complex, multi-year or phase projects, but you must be able to document and demonstrate that if you're asking for, say, the first year of funding, that there's a very urgent need to initiate this project for this particular funding cycle. You must also document a strategic pathway to project completion with definitive milestones and all funding sources identified and or secured. If future years' funding commitments are not identified or secured, you must demonstrate quantitative benefits from just this first phase portion of the project. You must also show the ability to complete the first phase within that 12-month period, and with no expectation for the need of an extension. If requesting the final year of funding for a phase project, you must provide evidence that this final year of funding will assure project completion. All right, let's move on to habitat restoration criteria. Like water quality restoration, the minimum request is $15,000, but the maximum is now $150,000. Just like water quality, there is a 50-50 match requirement. Habitat restoration has 2 criteria for all projects, and there are some additional criteria depending on your project type. The first, the project must align with the habitat section of the CCMP, And priority is given to the one habitat vital sign that's critical within there, which is seagrasses. Second criteria is you must document the site selection criteria and project success criteria. Some additional criteria for this category, depending on the project type, is if it's a filter feeder project, like clams or oysters, you must use non-plastic materials unless consistent with guidelines provided by permitting agencies. And lastly, if the project is a design and engineering phase, 100% plans must be completed and permits secured in the award timeframe. Like water quality, there are some other considerations and projects that could be proposed in this category, such as innovative pilot projects and large phase multi-year projects. The same type of documentation that I discussed for water quality also applies here. Additionally, habitat inventory and assessment projects that fill gaps in current assessments and or complete a lagoon-wide habitat inventory and assessment to guide future restoration projects are also considered eligible projects in this category. All right, on to community-based habitat restoration. Like the other categories, the minimum request is $15,000, the maximum is $150,000. Different to this category, you can see here, is the match is now only 25% of the total project cost. What is also different between community-based and habitat restoration, besides this match, is that the restoration work is done primarily with the use of volunteers. There are 3 criteria that must be met for this category, and they are: the proposal must align with one vital sign in either the habitats or the living resources sections of the CCMP, and one vital sign from one community or the one voice sections. Priority is given to the critical health concerns ranked vital signs that meet this criteria. Second, there must be an assessment of the community or volunteer contribution. That means estimates of how many volunteers, their hours, and the value. The value is listed in this RFP in the budget section. The third criteria is that the project must document site selection criteria and project success criteria, just like the habitat restoration category. Also different is design and engineering and large complex phase projects are not considered eligible in this category. All right, and lastly, we'll take a look at the science and innovation criteria. Like the other categories, the minimum request is $15,000 and the maximum is reduced to $100,000, but there's $200,000 available in this category, so multiple awards are guaranteed. Match is only 25% of the total project cost here. There are 2 criteria that must be met for this particular category. The first is that the proposal must align with the science and technology innovation vital sign and any other vital sign within the CCMP. Priority here is given to proposals that address gaps in knowledge identified in the CCMP or the One Lagoon monitoring plan. And that monitoring plan can be found under the resources tab at the top of the home page. I believe Jesse's going to put that in the chat for you. It's also, there's a hyperlink in the RFP document itself that can bring you to that. The second criteria, and new this year, is that proposals must document the appropriate applications and pathways to enhance resource management decision making. That means the science done in this project must be able to lead to changes in resource management. You cannot propose a project that leads to some interesting data, but has no application to that resource management. Also, design and engineering and large complex phase projects are not considered eligible in this category. So now that we kind of have an idea of the criteria for each categories, we know where to find them, we need to look at what are the conditions for funding. And all 4 categories require the same conditions for funding, and we'll go over them. They include that the 6-page proposal is complete and received on or before the deadline. And the deadline for these is January 5th at 5 p.m. Sorry. The 1-page executive summary is included and is in the correct format. Please note that the executive summary page does not count towards your 6-page proposal limit. A project map and project photo are included. Please do not embed them in the proposal. They should be separate files as either high-res JPEGs or PNG type files. They also do not count towards a 6-page proposal limit. A cover letter from the director or other person authorized to submit on behalf of the organization. This letter cannot be from another organization on behalf of the primary applicant. This letter does also not count towards the 6-page limit. And lastly, you must include partners' letters signed by that organization's authorized representative detailing how they are contributing to the project and how much they are contributing, either through cash or in-kind support. Again, these letters do not count towards the 6-page proposal limit. So now that we know what we need to provide in the proposal, let's look at what we need to provide in the proposal application and review the sections of the executive summary in that 6-page proposal. And what I'm going to do is kind of look at it through the scoring rubric, which should help you develop your narrative to get the most points. So the points here on the top are for the executive summary, and they're pretty straightforward. Make sure it's in the right format and you enter the data requested. The top of the page is just a table. The second half is a short project description, a list of the key outputs or deliverables, and a short list of the key outcomes or benefits to the Indian River Lagoon. Section A of the 6-page proposal is the project overview. The narrative must hit all the points listed here. Describe the project. Why is it important? What CCMP vital signs are being addressed? And you're going to see this as a recurring theme throughout these points scoring, but what is the urgent need for this project to fund? Section B, when quantifying the project outputs, be very succinct and clear. Be sure to list pounds of nutrients if water quality, linear feet or acres restored if habitat, the number of citizens engaged, publications expected transformative impacts of innovative technology, those types of things. Clearly cite any methodologies used in making these estimates. For Section C, project outcomes, clearly describe the expected benefits to the Indian River Lagoon. These benefits should be described in a short, medium, and long-term time frame. Important here, do not overstate your benefits. Reviewers are likely to reduce points if stretches on benefits are made. Section D, technical merit, should clearly articulate the need or urgency for implementing this project. That urgency should refer to peer-reviewed publications and not just general notions or anecdotal observations. For projects that require site selection criteria, here is your place to list it. You must also confirm the 12-month timeline here. If this is a multi-phase project, outline the phase to be completed during this award timeframe. In Section E, partner and local commitment, you want to identify any local or regional plans that this project could be identified in, and that's BMAPs or RAPs, or any other project regional plan for that matter. Also, identify project partners, their roles, and their commitments financially. If other funding sources are being used as match, state that source, the amount, and whether it has been secured or not. To answer a question some of you may be thinking about this time, it's not a requirement to have it secured at the time of proposal, but it has to be secured by contract execution. And we'll go over that again. Section F, project readiness. If the project is in design and engineering, a detailed timeline, including permitting, must be described. Regardless, for all projects, describe readiness to initiate the proposed work by the October 1st, 2024 contract start date. Provide a timeline that communicates the sequencing and timing of major tasks, and identify any tasks performed by subcontractors or your project partners. If the project is a construction project, but permits are not already secured, you'll automatically lose half the points available, so it's important to have your permits in hand for any construction project. For Section G, monitoring and evaluation, here's where you would describe your project success criteria. Be sure to provide a description of the methodologies used for data quality control and management. Identify how long-term maintenance and/or monitoring of the project will be accomplished following completion. And this long-term maintenance monitoring kind of ties into the next section, project sustainability. Be sure to describe your funding sources for future efforts, as well as how the project will be sustained long term. This next section only applies to the community-based restoration category RFP. This is where you would describe the volunteer effort by quantifying it and describing what the project aims to do with the volunteer effort being used besides just having labor. Is there knowledge awareness being measured? A behavior change? Something else? List it. This is your chance to list it. Section J, experience and past performance, is an important section where you get to describe similar types of projects you have already done. Additionally, state any prior projects with the NEP and their status. If you have any current projects in progress with the NEP, state their status as well, and if any of them are in an extension. Projects in an extension from the primary organization, not necessarily the primary investigator, at the time of submittal will negatively affect your score. This next section only applies to the science and technology category. It was added to address the new criteria for applying the knowledge learned to resource management. So be clear what management actions could be influenced by your project and how you see this project changing that management. This portion of the scoring is related to budget and funding. So what you want to do is identify all project partners, what components of the project they will be responsible for financially, either as cash or in-kind support. Provide a declarative statement detailing all sources of matching funding, amounts, and when the matching funds will be secured for the project. Please note that indirect costs cannot be used as a source of matching funds. However, they can be requested as part of the funding request. Please note that all the proposal categories have two types of budget tables. The first lists all the sources and partners of funding and breaks it down into cash or in-kind types. This is where you can find the approved volunteer hourly rate, and it usually increases every year. For this current cycle, it is $29.41. The second table lists costs more like what would be part of the contract agreement. And this table is listed by tasks or deliverables, and funding is broken down by request from the IRL Council and matching support from all partners. Congratulations, you've now completed your proposal, but there are additional points that can be added or deducted based on how well you wrote the 6-page proposal and responded to those sections. So these last two sections are from the reviewers and do not have any input from Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program staff. So first section, priorities. Remember those critical health concerns? Here's where those points come in. So urgency, we stress that throughout this entire scoring rubric. Did you make a good enough case that it's urgent? The last point, allocation, is the discretion of the reviewer. And one would assume or hope that if the project scored well enough to this point, the answer to it should be yes. But maybe the proposal was very poorly written, but the concept of the proposal is great, or the priority and urgency is high. You may get that extra bump it needs to reach the funding threshold. Inversely, a well-written proposal that doesn't have a clear value or benefit to the Indian River Lagoon can have points deducted. Lastly, in scoring are some bonus points, and these are assigned by NEP staff and made available for the reviewers to see, but they cannot change them, so they are equal to each individual proposal. Addressing these in your proposal narrative could be the key to making the funding threshold or ranking higher. So if it's the project in a basin management action plan or a reasonable assurance plan, 2 extra points. Does the project promote, implement coastal resilience? Add 2 extra points. Does the project support IRL priority communities as defined in the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program long-term bill strategy? Add 4 points. This strategy can be found on the website where the monitoring plan was located on the resources tab page. This should be described in detail and not just a statement. So we want to know how exactly you plan to benefit those communities. Does the project protect endangered species, historical, archaeological, or cultural assets? And another additional 2 points. You can also lose some points here, and there are 2 ways. So the first is, has the requesting organization ever failed to meet previous contract obligations based on written documentation? -5 points. Does the requesting organization have an active project and an extension? Minus 5 points. And that is determined at the time of submission. A couple more ways to earn points, though, is through match or reduced indirect. So say, for instance, you're an organization and your normal federally negotiated rate is 50%, and you state in the budget that it's going to be reduced to 10%. You can get points on that based on the rubric you see here. Additionally, if you exceed your match requirement, you can also gain points based on the rubric you can see here. And this was pulled out of the science and innovation category. So you can see it's only 25% match. This would be 50% if it was habitat restoration or water quality restoration. All right, let's talk some timelines. The most important timeline you have is submission. January 5th, 2024 at 5 p.m. Your entire application, and that consisted of the 5 items I listed under conditions for funding, must be submitted to me. And here's my email address at claudine@irlcouncil.org with a copy to Kathy Hill at irlcouncil.org. I highly recommend you submit it earlier than this, because if you do, there's a better chance I can do a quick skim through to make sure you have submitted all the required parts of the proposal application. And if you're missing something, can alert you to it so that you can make the amendment before the deadline. If you wait until the last minute, I will not have that opportunity. And if something is missing, your proposal is deemed non-responsive and will not be reviewed or scored. Once the proposals are reviewed, scored, and scores ranked, the management conference will make funding recommendations to the board of directors based on those rankings and available funds. The board does have the final decision on ranking and funding decisions. So what I'll do is, once that decision is made, I will post a note of decisions on the website no later than February 12th or 13th. And it will be sent to all applicants by category. Next, sometime in June, I'll reach out to all the awarded principal investigators to be in contract negotiations with your organizations and finalize the scope of work. Once the contract is fully executed, the project may begin on October 1st, 2024 and must complete by September 30th, 2025. Please note that this start date is 100% rigid. The IRL Council will not reimburse any work that occurred before 10/1/2024, even if the contract was executed before this date. Still have some questions? You're not alone. Each year we receive several questions right below the RFPs on the website. We post all those questions and answers, as I showed you earlier, received for the open funding cycle. However, there are many more questions and answers you can use as a resource. One of those resources is to the closed RFP page on the website. I'm going to put it up here for you. And at this link, you can view the questions and answers from prior funding cycles. Currently on this page, there are the last 4 years of RFPs and the questions and answers to them. I do caution you, however, that since RFPs do change slightly year to year, the question in prior years may not fully apply or have the same answer to current year RFPs. However, in most cases, they do apply. So if you're ever in doubt, please feel free to reach out to me. And with that, I'll go over some of the most common questions with Jesse and take questions from everybody else.
Awesome. Thank you, Daniel. So yes, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box. We'll go ahead and answer those live. We do have some questions in the chat, so we'll get started. Can you tell us a little bit more about where cash match can come from?
Cash match can be from any source. And one good thing, I get this question a lot year to year, is can federal funds be used as a matching source? We do get some funding from federal funds. However, since we are a state agency as an independent special district, we can accept federal funds as a match source.
Okay, great. Can you specify indirect costs for us?
Indirect costs are something that do not have a specific line item tied to them, such as facilities and administrative overhead type cost. That's all considered indirect.
Okay, perfect. My project spans the length of the lagoon. Where do I put the lat long if I'm not sure of where my sites are going to be?
You could use your headquarters or facility that you plan to work out of. However, if you have some sites already identified and they're all within the lagoon, maybe one of those that's kind of centrally located is okay. But please list all known um, sites if you have them in the narrative, if you can fit it.
Gotcha. Can an organization apply for more than one grant in a funding cycle?
Yes, they can.
All right. We have a boat that we use for projects. Can it be used as match, and how does that work?
Yes, it would be considered in-kind match. So this is something that doesn't have a cash value to it. It's, something that you just place a value on and use that. So, you want to use a reasonable rate for rental, essentially, for that boat. You could use the gas towards it as a cash match, or if that's part of your request, you could use the fuel as a request, or like a travel budget.
Perfect. Can tuition costs be used as match in any of these RFPs?
Yes.
Cool. I like the easy ones. All right, so I got my permit for this project before 10/1. Can I charge it back to the grant and be reimbursed for it?
No. So you could use that as match. So that cost could be considered match, but because it occurred before the award time frame, which is 10/1, it cannot be reimbursed.
All right. Um, if I have 4 partner organizations, but only 3 are providing funding, do I need a letter from the 4th partner?
You only need letters from partners that are contributing financially. So if they are providing cash or any kind of in-kind support, then you should have a letter from them. If they're just there to advise and not, their time is not being counted as in-kind, then no, you do not need one.
All right. Are there any formatting requirements for the proposals that we should be aware of?
That's a great question. We, in years past, have had several different types of format restrictions, such as font type and size type. I think we have removed a lot of those from this current cycle. However, if it's going to be 6-point font, it's going to be really hard on reviewers, and they may not favorably enjoy that. So try to stick around 11-point font if you can, and try to stick within 0.75 margins if you can.
All right, perfect. This is a good one. Single or double spaced?
Single space is fine.
Single space, perfect. Can I submit a proposal if I do not have any partners? Another question that ties into that one is, can I submit a proposal if I am a private company?
So yes to both. So you do not have to have any partners to be considered eligible for funding. As long as you have met the match requirement on as yourself as your own organization, that is totally acceptable. And also, you have to be anybody is eligible if they're an organization. So it could be a county government, could be an NGO, could be a homeowner association. As long as you're a legal entity, an LLC, an Inc., any of those are eligible. A single individual, however, cannot be eligible.
Okay, so a religious organization?
As long as they have a legal framework set up in place, yes.
Gotcha, perfect. Where is the list of projects that were preferred projects? That is the CCMP, correct?
Yeah, so when you're looking through the CCMP, and you can see it right behind me here, when you're reading through it, there's a point that lists the critical health concerns. And so those are all the priority ones. But if you go through each RFP, the criteria, those priority ones are kind of stick with it. So the water quality priorities are going to be with those critical health concerns within water quality. Ones for habitats going to be seagrasses, because that's the only critical health concern in habitats.
Okay.
But there's 6 of them that are considered critical and have that extra little bump in points.
Perfect. Are all projects needing to be wet? So can habitat restoration that is directly related to the lagoon but considered coastal be considered if they do not meet the seagrass criteria?
Yes. Yeah. So the Project boundaries are the entire watershed. So you could be miles and miles away from the lagoon and be doing a project as long as you can make a case that this project is going to benefit the water quality of the lagoon. So since so much of what happens on land eventually runs down into the lagoon, that shouldn't be too hard of a stretch to make. But yes, it can be design engineering. It doesn't even have to be um, an actual construction project. So yes.
And I think KJ can clarify this for us, but there is a map of the watershed on page 4 of the CCMP.
There's also one in all of the RFPs. So one of your attachments is a map of the watershed. However, you are welcome to get a GIS file from KJ. She'll be happy to share that with you. So you can make sure for sure if you think you're on the edge, she can do that for you.
Perfect. KJ, did you want to follow up? I see your mic toggling on.
I was just gonna do a thumbs up. I can do that.
Perfect. Do we provide partial funding for projects?
Yes. So what'll happen is once the scores are ranked, all the projects are ranked, the funding kind of starts at the top and goes down that list. There could be a chance where one of the projects within that list isn't going to get everything that they asked for because the funding runs out. So we will, and if the board agrees, we will make an offer to the primary applicant, saying, would this amount help towards your project? And then it's just a matter of, working with that applicant to decide if they want to pursue the project with that partial funding or withdraw.
So if my project was going to be like a $200,000 project and I'm asking the NEP for 50,000 of that, that would be okay?
Yeah, as long as you're able to, we have several projects that are multi-million and the applicant asks for say 100,000 where $1,000 benefits each citizen, for example, on a septic or sewer project, and they're covering the rest of that. That's totally acceptable.
Perfect. Can you please describe match once more, going over both cash and in kind?
Sure. So cash is actual physical dollars that you're going to spend on something, paying a contractor, equipment, supplies, salary, all that is, could be considered cash. In kind is something that you're not specifically paying for, but is being used as a dollar, has an assigned value to it. So a lot of times salary can be used as in-kind match, fringe benefits, rental costs. I mean, almost anything that's cash, but you're not actually showing receipts for it is considered in kind. Volunteers are considered in kind. That support that they use, their time, their value of that.
They're worth $29.49.
41 cents.
It's insane.
And it'll go up, I'm sure, next year.
Yeah. Where can I find the list of IRL priority communities?
That is in the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program's long-term bill strategy. So if you went to the website and found the resources tab at the top and clicked on that and scrolled down a little bit under technical documents, you'll see one that says, well, it looks like Jesse put the actual straight link to the PDF in the chat there for everybody.
Keep explaining it. It'll be perfect for the recording.
But yes, right. That's where it is. If you scroll down, you'll find, and there's maps in there that show where those communities are located, and you'll be able to see. One key is that your project does not have to occur in that exact area, but if the benefits of your project are going to inure to those locations, then it would still be eligible under that priority communities. You just have to make the case for it in your narrative.
Gotcha. For multi-year complex projects, is there a maximum year limit?
No, but what you need to do is make sure that every year for each year's project has to have an individual benefit. So if you're going to do, say, a total upgrade of a wastewater treatment plant, this is going to take multiple years and you're asking for funding across it, every year phase has to have some sort of quantitative benefit.
Perfect. Can money spent on the project prior to October 1 be considered match?
Yes, to a point. So it can't be something that was done 10 years ago and be considered part of this project. You know, I would say from the point that you are awarded, notified you're awarded, so that phase time between notice of award and contract, and you wanted to start early on the project, we would consider that.
Okay.
But before that time frame, no.
Perfect. All right, and that's all that we have for questions. So if you have any late burning questions you'd like to put in the chat, we'd be happy to answer them. I'm curious to see how many proposals we're going to get now. I think it's going to be a banner year for proposals. All right, everybody. Well, that is all we have for today. Just kidding. Is there an application template for this year?
So the application template, I'm betting this question is kind of, what's that?
So we got like more questions and
Okay.
so
I was gonna say that application template is typically, I'm thinking what somebody's thinking of, the small grants, but we do have a proposal format within each of these main RFPs. So if we want to go back, I can try to show you those. So I think you can all see this now. This is one of the water quality restoration, and so it says proposal application right here, number 4. So if we scroll down to, here's your application form. So this is the executive summary format. So that's that table I referred to, and then you fill in these on that one page, and then here's your 6-page proposal sections, and you're just going to write narrative for each one of these sections, A, B, C, D, all the way through, and you just have to fit all of that narrative within 6 pages. So that's your template.
all right. Can an organization submit more than one proposal to the same category?
Ooh, good question. Yes, you can. However, if you're submitting, say, multiple, you're competing against yourself, and you may not be able to get both projects funded. So I highly recommend that an organization determine its priorities and submit its most urgent proposal for that category.
Perfect. And last one, do the proposals have to be 1 year max unless it's a large scale multi-year project?
Yes.
Okay.
So if you're a large scale multi-phase, again, you're just, you're doing a year by year phasing. So if it's a main project, it should just be 1 year. If it's going to go over that year, you're now phasing it.
Okay, perfect. Are figures and tables in the proposal, or should they be provided separately? Should they be included in the proposal or provided separately?
Figures and tables should be provided in the 6-page proposal. The only thing that you're going to kind of pull out and send as separate are going to be a photo of the project location or of the project itself and a map. Now, say you don't have any photo, you could use that photo as your table.
Okay.
Figure.
That works. Will the PowerPoint be made available to the attendees?
Yes, so we are this is being recorded, so we will post this recording to the website, so you'll be able to view it as you see fit.
Okay, now we have no open questions.
And if you think of something after this webinar, feel free to just shoot me an email. Again, my email is listed in the in the webinar in the beginning, but it's Kolodny, Kolodny at IRLCouncil.org. I'll be sure to get you an answer as quick as I can.
Shared it in the chat.
There you go.
Thank you was a question, and we'll answer that. You're welcome. All right, guys, I think that does it for our webinar today. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Again, if you have any additional questions, please feel free to email Daniel or myself. We would love to talk to you about this. If you are interested in a small grant, just remember that we will be having a specific webinar for small grant writing in February, early February. So we're actually going to bring in some official grant writers for that to give us some grant writing tips and tricks. So feel free to tune into that. We will be sending out the recording for this webinar shortly, along with a small survey that we ask that you get back to us. And if you'd like, we will also have this recording available on our website, onelagoon.org. Thank you guys so much. Have a great day.